guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? It's time for another spooky season special. So another quick rundown of one of my horror trades. Today we're going to look at Alan Moore's Providence. So this is the most recent thing that Alan Moore has put out in comics. This came out in 2017. And this feels like a bit of a culmination. This is the best adaptation of Lovecraft that I have seen. And not just an adaptation, it's also an amalgamation of all of Lovecraft. So in this story, we're going to get basically all of Lovecraft's creations becoming reality. The basic plot is our protagonist, Robert Black. He's a newspaperman who is trying to come up with a book or a story or something where he's going to travel around America. Actually, I don't think it's all of America. I think it's just probably the Northeast, which would make sense in a Lovecraft story. And he's going to look for basically the secret history of America. And this is very much a case of being pointed from A to B to C, etc., where he visits some person and interviews them and has some fucked up experiences and then moves on to the next one for the next chapter. And each of the chapters is also a take on a Lovecraft story or on a couple of stories. In the first one, we're going to start off kind of small with Cool Air, which is one of my favorites. I read a fair amount of Lovecraft when I was growing up, and it always bugged me that there was never a good adaptation of Lovecraft stuff. There's no good movies. There's no really good comics. Like, the best you can hope for is, like, the feel of Lovecraft. Like the movie In the Mouth of Madness. You know, it isn't specifically a Lovecraft story, but it feels very much like a Lovecraft story. It's about the closest you were going to get, at least until they did The Color Out of Space, which was pretty good. Color Out of Space was never one of my favorites. I'm more of a Dunwich horror man myself, but anyway, the first episode here takes off of Cool Air, which is a story of a doctor who is attempting to preserve himself past his natural lifespan through the use of cryogenics, but cryogenics while he's still alive. I think the idea of freezing your body for later use wasn't really one that was out there just yet. And it's a good place to start because at least the conceit, while there is a bit of weirdness to it, it could also be played for very normal. It's just, he's a very eccentric professor with a health condition, and he has to keep the temperature low. And he's able to point Robert Black off in the next direction. And there's a lot of story elements in this that get kind of tied together. We get secret societies, we get more methods of trying to extend human life. As we progress through the series, the stories get weirder and weirder. And then eventually we do get to see a Lovecraftian apocalypse, which is one thing I always wanted to see. I understood why we didn't get it in the Lovecraft days, because, I mean, Lovecraft liked to suggest way more than he liked to tell. And, I mean, if he does a Lovecraftian apocalypse, then theoretically, I'm not sure if his mind can work around the idea of being able to still use that continuity. He might be able to. But yeah, the series touches on Cool Air, Dagon, the Dunwich horror, Pickman's model, Beyond the Mountains of Madness, Beyond the Walls, like all sorts of crazy stuff. And it ties it all together in a really satisfying way. There is a prologue to this, which is the Neonomicon, which is set in present day. Providence itself is set almost entirely in the 1930s, because it has to be, because Lovecraft himself is a character in it. But Neonomicon is present day. It took a little while before I realized, I think, that it was Lovecraftian. It's a bit of a slower build, and it doesn't reach the same kind of heights. But like I said, it is just the prologue. I want to say you don't need to read the Neonomicon in order to read Providence, except that the last chapter does relate directly, so you kind of do. The series is drawn by Jason Burrows, who is a guy I've seen around for a little while. I've mostly seen him attached to Garth Ennis projects, so like Crossed, or he had a Punisher one-shot. And he's a guy I wasn't a big fan of at first. Gotta make sure we open this to an okay page, because there's a lot of gore and nudity in this. He has come a long way over the years, and he's one of those guys now, like a Frank Quitely, who maybe has like a bit of an objectionable style. Like, it's not going to be for everybody, but he can fit everything into the world he's creating, and he does draw like everything so that it works. The only thing with Jason Burrows is I don't know how much of his stuff is traced. And by traced, I mean drawn on a computer with a background that he just does outlines around. Because a lot of his backgrounds are just a little too perfect. Everything is properly proportioned, and everything has like a shit ton of detail to it. Some of that is on the coloring, but a lot of it is there in the finished artwork. And I don't know how much of that was present earlier in his career. Anyway, there's one thing I should mention, and I think we're probably far enough into the review now that I can. This does have the unfortunate thing that a lot of Alan Moore stories have, which is rape, and it has it a few times. Neonomicon has it, and there's at least one notable one in Providence. and a couple more that are kind of arguable. And I've seen it mentioned online a fair few times that Alan Moore likes to put that in a lot of comics. I'm like, no, he doesn't. What are you talking about? He's used it just a couple of times. And then you think it's like, well, there were a few. And I think he's just using them for emotional impact. Like, it's an easy way to just kind of get a gut punch, but like, that doesn't really stop making the depiction and therefore the material kind of distasteful. So there is that. If you want to avoid it because of that, I don't think I'd blame you. Personally, I think it works in context as much as that kind of thing can work. I think there's kind of a theory that Alan Moore has that a lot of Lovecraft stuff has an underlying fascination and revulsion of sexuality, and that does play a prominent part in the story. So, it is all open to Alan Moore's interpretation. I still think this is the best adaptation I've ever seen of Lovecraft's work. There's a lot of care and research in this, maybe not like From Hell levels, but way, way more than most people do on like anything. So yeah, I would recommend this with a bit of an asterisk. It's a hell of a story. If you like Lovecraft, it's kind of got everything. And it's also the last comic Alan Moore wrote, at least so far. And that was like 7 years ago. So that'll do it for this one. I think I should still have at least 1 or 2 more of these coming out. So I'll see you guys there. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.